Ronda spelled without an H, which is unusual. My first name came from in the Jewish religion, children are named after relatives that have passed away, generally with the same first initial that they had. And I had a grandmother called Rivka, a great grandmother, called Rivka, and that's who my mother wanted to name me after. She was looking for a girl's name with an R, not knowing, of course, whether it'd be a girl or a boy, but hoping for a girl. She was looking for a name that started with an R. She was sitting on a park bench. There was a movie theater marquee in front of her with a movie starring Ronda Fleming. That's where she got my first name from, but she dropped the H because she said it doesn't sound like there's an H in there, so she didn't put the H. My middle name, Karen, is a little more interesting. My father's mother was dating a man who didn't have any grandchildren that were named for his parents. So he asked my mother to name her child for his mother. And even though we weren't related, my mother was only 20 years old at the time and was intimidated by him to the point where she agreed to name me after his mother, whose name was Kay or Kate or something like that. And that's where the Karen came from. And the Brooks, of course, is my dad's last name. It was changed from Bruck, which is B-R-U with an umlaut C-K, from Austria, and changed at, I'm guessing, Ellis Island. Some of my family members are Brooks, and some of my family members are Bruck. And that's where my names came from. And I didn't change my name when I got married. Husband's last name is Smith.
Okay. All right. What's your present family situation?
I am married to Alan Smith, who owns a printing business. He's originally from Philadelphia and moved to New York by way of San Francisco to work with some family members. We have 3 amazing, wonderful children. My oldest son, Sam, is 23 years old, was named for his grandfather. He is a second-year law student at Hofstra and attended University of Massachusetts, and is just a wonderful, brilliant, loving son. My middle child is Hunter. He is 19 years old. He's a second-year student at Binghamton University and studying business and management, and is a really great kid, loves sports, has a great sense of humor, and he's a really funny kid. It's great. And my youngest is a daughter. Her name is Devin, and she is she's 17 years old, a senior in high school, and hoping to go in the fall to Binghamton or possibly New Paltz. She's been applying to colleges.
And what's the high school she's attending?
Comac High School. They all went to Comac schools.
How are they different, and how are they the same?
Oh, okay. How they're different is Sam is the oldest. He's very studious. He really organizes all his work. He, if he is faced with a challenge, he just goes and grabs it. He just does it. He was accepted to the law review, so that's a lot of extra work on top of all the extra work that you do in law school anyway. So he just goes right ahead with a challenge. Hunter gets a little more worried when he's got things that kind of pile up in front of him, and he gets a little how am I going to do this? How am I going to get this done? He gets it done, does a beautiful job, and is always makes us really proud of him. But he gets a little more worried about it. And my daughter, her attitude about everything is kind of all right, whatever. Just gets through it. Also does really great in school. So they really just have very different attitudes. One studies hard, one worries a lot, and one is just okay, I'll get it done.
Do they have distinct talents, each one of them?
Oh, let's see.
Or abilities or interests?
Yeah, sure. Well, Sam is, of course, very busy right now with school, and is very talented at working hard in school. Very interested in sports. Also has a lot of good friends. Goes out, hangs out with his friends, and knows a lot about sports. Hunter knows even, I think, a lot more about sports than Sam does. We're very sports oriented. Not me as much, but the family is. Also has a lot of really nice friends. I like the group of friends that he hangs out with. He could probably tell you any statistic on any player in any sport at any time in history. Wow. And Devin, recently started doing a lot of babysitting and making a lot of money and working with kids and working at a summer camp. Did a really good job with that. But really found now that she loves sign language, and she's been taking sign language classes in high school, and was even chosen to sign at a pep rally recently, the Star Spangled Banner. And her friend videotaped it and put it on YouTube, so that was really exciting because we all got to watch her do it. So she might have found a new calling very, very recently that she's really interested in. They're all really great kids.
So are the kids all at home?
Hunter is away at Binghamton. Sam is living at home and going to Hofstra, where he got a huge scholarship for law school, so he will not owe any money when he's done with law school. It's amazing. And Devin's living at home finishing high school and will be going away most likely to college in September.
Now, tell us when you were born and where that birthplace was.
I was born January 3rd, 1954 in the Bronx. I am very proud of being born in the Bronx and growing up in the Bronx. West 176th Street in Andrews. I think it's called Morris Heights section. My dad lived in that neighborhood growing up. My mom also grew up in the Bronx. And we lived in the Bronx until I was 13 years old, when we moved to Yonkers, where I lived for about 5 years till I went to college and never really moved back home after that.
And Ronda, what's the earliest memory you can pull up?
On the, let's see which one it is. It was the Christmas Eve before I was 1. My parents took me to a neighbor's Christmas party. And my dad, no, let me think. It might have been New Year's Eve before I was 1. It was New Year's Eve before I was 1, because my dad was playing with this horn. I remember, and I wanted it. And then I was playing with it, and I stuck my finger in this. It was a tin horn. People used to blow those things. And they couldn't get my finger out of the horn. And when they finally got my finger out of the horn, I remember I was bleeding on a white couch, and they had to find a doctor on New Year's Eve to put a stitch in my finger where I still have a scar on my finger. So I mean, it's probably a combination of the story my parents told me, but I really remember thinking, if I stick my finger in it, he can't get it back from me. So they couldn't have told me that thought. So I remember doing that. So that's a really, really early memory.
What was your mother's maiden name?
Mom's maiden name is Crowder, Krauter. That's her dad's last name. He was from Poland, Russia, Poland. They were all the same country then. So,
what do you know about your mother and father's history, or the family histories?
Well, you mean like how my parents met each other?
That and the background, the historical background, like the work that they did.
Okay. All right. My mother's the youngest of 5 children. Sadly, she's the only one surviving of all those 5 now, and her parents, of course, are gone. Her parents immigrated from, my grandmother, we were told, was from Russia, and my grandfather from Poland. I think that they were kind of connected, those countries at the time. I think my grandparents were also somehow distantly related to each other, which is probably what makes me so crazy. But so they met in the States. My grandmother came on I had to do an interview with her once when I was a kid, so I got some background about her. And she came on a boat in, 1904 or something like that. She was very young, and they didn't go to school when they were kids. They didn't know, or they didn't know the language or something like that. And a truant officer came to their house and got all the kids to go to school and gave them all American names, because they had, Jewish names, and I don't know what their real names were. But so my grandmother became Mary, and her brother became Joseph, which I think are kind of interesting names for Jewish kids. But and there was a bunch of kids. I don't remember how many, and they that's how they ended up going to school and getting their American names. My dad's parents were born here, so I don't really know anything about before that, except that they were from Austria. I don't know too much about the great-grandparents, and I don't know my dad's dad, because he died when my dad was 7 of stomach cancer or something like that. My grandmother never remarried. My grandmother worked in a bank. She had a series of boyfriends that I remember, and she used to go dancing at Roseland and win dancing contests and those kinds of things. I remember that. So my dad grew up without a dad and with a brother, and my mom grew up the youngest of five, and
Your dad grew up with a brother. Is
yeah.
his brother deceased?
I don't know.
Okay.
My dad is deceased, but I don't know because they were not very close with each other. As I got older, they stopped talking to each other, so I don't really know if he's. I was actually looking for him on the internet the other day, but I didn't see anywhere that he had died, so he might still be living.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I checked him out.
How about tell me what your mother enjoyed doing? I know she was probably a 50s mom, but what did she enjoy doing when she could do what she loved to do?
What did my mom like doing? She liked playing mahjong as she was growing up, which is what I do a lot now. I don't know, I think she liked hanging out with her friends and, in the Bronx, like growing up, I remember everybody in the summer nights, the beautiful warm summer nights, we would have folding chairs because we were in apartment buildings, and they would all take their chairs out and they would just sit on the sidewalk and just talk like all night. They would just talk and talk. They'd go to Yonkers racetrack sometimes. They would, but I just remember mahjong and hanging out.
When you talked family with your father while you had him in your life, did he ever talk about what the occupation of his family was, or why he was doing the work that he was doing? Was it related to family in any way?
Well, Dad worked in a bank for 33 years, and that's actually how he met my mom, which I didn't tell you about yet, but my mom was working in an office somewhere, and she used to go to the bank to make the bank deposits, and my dad was the teller, and that's how they met each other. And one day she went to make the deposit and he wasn't there, so she asked the manager why he wasn't there, and he had an appendix attack and he was in the hospital having his appendix removed. So she sent him a get well card, or she brought him I can't remember exactly what happened, but anyway, when he got back to work, he asked her out, and they were married 9 months after that. So I know that. And
what year would that have been that they got married?
It was either 51 or 52. I don't remember.
Okay.
And they were married for 25 years and then were divorced.
I see.
Yeah, so not too bad. So the question was...
when you talked to your father, was there anything
about his family?
About his family background?
I don't know too much about his family. I know his mom worked in a bank, but that was later. I think my dad worked in a bank before his mom did. I don't know what his dad did. Like I said, he was very young when he lost his dad. So I don't really know. I don't know too much about their family. I know probably a lot more about my mom's side of the family.
You weren't an only child, were you?
No, two younger brothers.
Tell me about that.
Okay, my first younger brother, his name is Scott, and he is 2.5 years younger than me. And it was just the two of us for a really long time because my other brother wasn't born until I was almost 14. So it was just the two of us. We lived in one small apartment in the Bronx, a one-bedroom apartment. There was my parents' bed, there was my bed, and there was a crib in the one bedroom. That's what I remember, and a living room and a kitchen. And then we moved upstairs to the bigger apartment that had 3 bedrooms, and I had my own room, and Scott had his own room, my parents had their own. We had a living room, we had a kitchen, we had a huge foyer that we had a TV and a couch, and it was just like another whole room. So that was like a great apartment. I wish I still had that apartment. It's huge. And so Scott and I used to play and fight, and we were, I guess, pretty normal brother and sister growing up with each other. And then we moved to Yonkers, like I said, when I was 13, and then Michael was born. My brother Michael was born right after that. Let's see, Scott worked for IBM until last Wednesday when he retired. He was a vice president for public relations. He did a whole lot of great stuff with them, and retired after. He started in the mailroom, literally worked from the mailroom, worked his way up to vice president of IBM, which is amazing, and just retired.
Wow. And
he's got 2 kids and a wonderful wife and 2 twin granddaughters and nice family.
And Michael?
Michael is married to Janice and has been working for some company, which I can't remember what they do, but he does data entry for them, and he's really happy with his job and has a lot of friends. He's into CB radios and internet research, finding family trees. His genealogy is his thing. That's what he does. So I hope Michael gets to see this too. But he probably knows all these stories better than I do. And he's helped a couple of people like find their parents or their kids there's a story written up in the newspaper about how he helped connect that father and daughter. So he does really great research kind of stuff like that.
Growing up, were there lessons that you as a little girl have taken with you, lessons that you learned from your own family, things that you remember and have made part of you even today?
I think it was very important. Education was very important. My parents didn't go to college. They both were high school graduates, didn't go to college, and I was, I guess, the first one to go to college in my immediate family, so that was a great thing to do. I think it was important. In my family, there was always a lot of competition. We were always playing games with each other. At dinner, we would sit and play a game. We would play like 20 questions at dinner every night. Or we'd play forms of TV show games that, that we would just make up our own version of. And that's what we did at dinner every night. It was me and my parents and my brother, because my other brother, like I said, didn't come along for a long time. And so there was a lot of sense of competition and trying to like be the best at something and trying to be better at something. And it was always friendly. It wasn't, in your face kind of stuff. But we always had a lot of fun doing that. But I think it instilled in all of us a real sense of competition. And we still do things like that. Like my mom will read a menu from a restaurant and she'll find a lot of mistakes on it. She goes, "Oh, I found 5 mistakes on this. How many can you find?" So we still are always doing things like that. My brothers too, or even my youngest brother is, we're just always into competing and seeing who could find more errors or do better proofreading or answer more trivia questions. Or so that was kind of something that is a real memory of growing up.
If I ask you to take a snapshot of your early family life, can you go to one particular moment or one experience, take a picture of it, and tell me what it looks like?
I think it would have to be holiday parties. We would get together with extended family, and I can't pick one particular holiday, one day in time, but on even though we were Jewish, we would get together on Christmas, Mother's Day, Father's Day, and Thanksgiving. I think those were the 4 times a year that my mom's whole extended family, her brothers and sisters and their kids, there were 10 grandchildren and my grandparents and my aunts and uncles. So we would all get together on those holidays and have a big meal. We'd switch around to different houses. So, we'd go out to Syosset, which was way out from where we lived in the Bronx. That was so far away. And or we'd go up to Peekskill where my other aunt lived, and we would just go around to everybody's house and just have holiday parties. And I really liked that. I liked getting together with my cousins and the aunts and uncles. And
did you also celebrate the Jewish holidays?
Not so much. Now I'm a lot more observant in that religion than I was growing up, and but then we weren't really such a religious family. We always knew we were Jewish, and it was never that anything that we were ashamed of or anything like that. We were proud of who we were. We just really didn't observe that much, and I don't think either of my parents grew up observing, so we just kind of continued along that way.
Were there, other than family members, were there other adult influences that were formative in your life?
Let's see. I mean, my parents had lots of friends. They'd come over and play cards and mahjong and things like that. So, I knew all their friends.
Was there a particular aunt, an uncle, a neighbor,
a aunt
teacher?
And uncle. Definitely aunt and uncle. My mother's sister, Maddie, and her husband, Bernie, were probably my 2 favorite people I ever knew in my whole life. And they were artists. They had an art studio on 42nd Street in Manhattan, and they were commercial artists, and they did lots of ad campaigns for famous countries. Now we have the light on, and it just popped on, and I used to go visit them in their penthouse office in Manhattan occasionally, and it was just like so exciting to go in and see them, and Aunt Maddie was just like so sweet and so wonderful. And as we got older, her house seemed to be the central meeting place for everything. That became the place where everybody went. But Uncle Bernie, who married her later, it was her second marriage, he was the most amazing, wonderful person. And even though he wasn't a blood relative, I felt closer to him than any relative that I ever had. And he was my go-to person if something was bothering me. He's the one I would call to talk to. He he could talk to anybody about anything and be the most interested person you ever met. He would stop people at the bus stop or on the train to work, or at work, or just strangers, a waiter in a restaurant. He would draw pictures on the back of the check that he would give to them so they'd have something from him. And he just was so interested in everybody.
Do you remember one thing that he once told you? One specific memory that you have?
Yeah, we were at some gathering and my brother was late, and he was late, and I can't remember. I was really angry that he was late. He was either bringing something or I don't remember why I was mad. I was really mad, and I was stomping him and saying, "Where is he? How come he's not here?" And Barney said to me, "What if he had an accident and he died? Like, would you be this mad at him?" And I was like, "Whoa!" Like he just kind of really put me in my place. And I was like, "Thanks for saying that." That was really helpful. Put a little perspective on it. Unfortunately, he wasn't in an accident and died, and he just got caught in traffic or something. But it just kind of made me think.
Who was the person that you would identify as having the greatest influence on your choice of career when you decided to embark upon an educational future?
That's interesting. Let's think. My mom was a bookkeeper. My dad worked in a bank. My brother worked for IBM. Like, I'm the only one who kind of went into the human services thing. And I think, I don't know who specifically. I think it just was based on someone that I knew in my life who had some issues growing up, and I felt a lot of compassion for that person, and it kind of inspired me to want to work with other people who were having issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the most difficult career decision you've ever had to make?
I've been really, really fortunate with my careers. I'm really lucky how they all worked out. So I don't know. Maybe retiring, because I really liked what I was doing a lot. I really, really liked my job. So that was a difficult decision.
Sure.
Yeah.
Could you name a couple, or even if you have more than one, those unforgettable teachers that you've had in your life?
Okay, let's see. I had a lot of elementary school teachers who liked me a lot. I had one that I didn't like so much. So I remember a couple of unhappy times in fourth grade with this teacher I really didn't like. And then at the end of the year, she said, "And I have great news. You're all going into class 5-1, and I'm going to be your teacher." So now they're doing looping, but I think we looped way back in 1965 when we got her again, and I was not happy to get her again. I remember all my elementary school teachers. Mrs. Kuhneman in second grade was very sweet, and Mrs. Sachs used to live in my neighborhood. We would see her walking around. She was my first grade teacher. So I really liked those teachers. Probably my favorite teacher ever was my high school Spanish and French teacher. I took both, and I had her for each class. And I was really her teacher's pet, so she really liked me a lot, and she made no secret about that. She would announce to the class. We had a bulletin board once that we had to make, and she was going to make it. "I'm going to put a bulletin board up on this wall." And she says, "What am I talking about? Ronda's going to put a bulletin board up on this wall." So she made it very clear that she really liked me. We had a student protest one day. I can't even remember what we were protesting, but the kids, we were all cutting classes to, I don't know, protest something that was going on in the school. And the teachers were told to drop our grades by 2 points or something for anybody who participated in these protests. We were supposed to lose credit. And this particular teacher said, "You will not lose any points in my class. If you have something you believe in, then you should go ahead and let people know how you feel, and you will not lose any points in my class." She wrote on my college application, on my recommendation, she wrote, "Fortunate is the college that accepts Ronda." So I'll never forget that line. So she was really great.
What's one of the games that you used to play growing up that you loved?
Oh my gosh. Well, in the Bronx, we played everything. We played punch ball. We played stick ball. We played hit the penny. We played hit the curve. We played stoop ball and curve ball and hit the sign and Johnny on the pony and Potsy, which is a lazy way to play hopscotch. and just every street game you could play, we played. Scully with bottle caps with melted wax in them, and you flick with your fingers this bottle cap around this board. Everything was with chalk on the sidewalk. So we played. I mean, any street game was as good as any other street game. So those were all great.
Yes. Now, when you became a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask you if you can go back and remember the first time, or maybe not the first time, but maybe any time that you received a gift from a student that really touched you, that you remember to this day.
All right. Well, I was a school social worker for 25 years in Brentwood, and let's see, there were really lots of great moments. Oh, I remember there was one kid very early on who was living with his aunt and uncle. He couldn't live with his parents. He had been abused by his parents, or physically abused, emotionally abused, other abuses. I'm not going to go into detail. And he used to come to my office once a week, mandated counseling through CSE, and he wouldn't talk. He just didn't want to talk about anything. All he wanted to do was play cards. So we would sit and play cards. I mean, for months. All we did every week, we'd play Uno or some other card game. And he was great, and he was fine, he was comfortable, and he never, I'd say, has things at home fine, has everything right. He didn't want to talk. And after he was getting close to graduating, and then he talked a little bit. I put him in a group with some other kids, and then he opened up a little more. And when he graduated, he had made in shop, was it called shop then? I don't know. He made a wooden nameplate for me. It said Ms. Brooks on it, and on the bottom he wrote love and his name. And I was like, what's this for? He says, it just was like so great to have you to come and talk to. And, so he made a nameplate that I still have. And, I was totally surprised and touched by that. So there were lots of little things like that, but that one really stands out. That's probably the first big one. So,
when you were in school, what did you like to do after school?
When I went to school?
Yeah, when you went to school, what did you like after school activity? What were you
in high school, there was a park in Yonkers called Untermeyer Park, which is which was built by a poet named Samuel Untermeyer. No, not him. Louis Untermeyer, a guy named Louis Untermeyer, and he brought ruins over from Europe. So there were I don't know if they're from Greece or Rome. There are pools and gazebos and a Medusa's head in tile in the ground. And so it was like 3 blocks from my house. We used to walk there every day. And so that's where I hung out a lot with my friends. And people would have guitars. This is 1960, late 1960s. So, the hippies, my friends were the hippies. And we had guitars, and we would sit in the park, and we would sing, and we would just hang out with each other. And, relationships would start and end. And that's where I spent most of my high school years, was hanging out in the park.
Did you have a favorite subject in school, or a least favorite subject?
Yeah, favorite subject was Spanish.
Okay.
And that there was a time that I wanted to become a Spanish translator, until I ended up going into social work. But I can tell you how that happened too.
Are you fluent?
No, not fluent enough,
No.
but I sure
Okay.
got to use a lot in Brentwood, which was a wonderful.
Yes.
It was a blessing that I had studied
Yes.
that. It was very, very useful. Least favorite subject, probably social studies, history.
Okay.
Not so much
Did
into
you
that.
Did you have a favorite toy or a doll that you remember? Or if you didn't play with dolls and you played with something else?
Too. Yeah, no, I had a Barbie doll that actually I still have. So
Mm.
I have a teddy bear that I still have.
Okay.
That just reminded me of a story. Okay, so I had this high chair, this metal doll high chair that I guess my baby dolls used to sit in, and it really was falling into great disrepair. It was rusted and old and breaking, and I think my parents had glued it and welded it and taped it and whatever you could do to keep it back together. And I remember that my dad said it was time to throw it out because it just was. I was too old and it was just broken, and I was really sad about throwing it out because it just was mine for a long time. And I remember they threw it. They brought it down to the basement into the garbage, and I was really sad. I remember going out to my dad that night and saying, I'm really sad about throwing this thing away. And he said that he understood that, and he was really very nice and compassionate about it. He said, sometimes we just have to grow up and get rid of things that are part of our childhood. And I was like, that was really touching. And it was nice that he understood what I was saying. And he, was trying to explain to me it was part of growing up. So I remember that about one particular toy growing up.
Sounds like a great guy, by the way.
He was a great guy.
Your favorite season, then and now?
Summer. Always summer.
Okay.
I like it hot. I like
Okay.
I like being able to. I like the sun going down late. I like it being light. I like the beach.
Yes.
I like just hanging out, being able to relax, going on vacation, those kinds of things.
An aroma that is a favorite because of the memories that it evokes?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. Chocolate?
Okay.
It's just my favorite because I love chocolate.
Yeah.
Something may come to me. I don't have an
Okay.
exact answer on that right now.
I was thinking of putting yourself back into your early years,
Mm-hmm.
and an aroma might even been a food. I don't know.
Yeah,
But that
yeah.
triggers a good
Yeah.
feeling even now.
Almost any food.
Okay.
Triggers a good feeling now.
Rhonda, what were the schools that you've attended right along?
I went to some nursery school called Scrolls Nursery School or something like that in the Bronx. Didn't care for that very much because they made you take a nap every day and I wasn't a napper, so that was always a struggle. PS 109 in the Bronx from kindergarten to 5th grade. That was on, was that Popham Avenue? Something like that.
Mm.
And then we were the first year in the Bronx to move 6th grade into junior high school. So we were way ahead of all these middle schools out here because that was, I think, 1965 or 6. That mine was the first grade that tried this. They called it the 5-3-4 plan, where there were 5 elementary grades, 3 junior high school grades, and 4 high school grades. So we were the experimental year. So that was McCombs Junior High School 82 on University Avenue in the Bronx, and my dad went to the same junior high school. And then we moved when I was in a program. They had a program called the SPs, where they would combine 7th and 8th grade, and you do 2 years in one. It was like skipping. But we moved to Yonkers at the end of January of 1967, and that would have been right in between my 7th and 8th year. Yonkers didn't have an SP program, so instead of putting me ahead to 8th grade, they kept me in 7th grade, even though I argued and fought about it and complained about it. And I said, but I finished 7th grade, and my guidance counselor from the Bronx said, but she finished 7th grade, they still put me in 7th grade. So then I decided that this was going to be my life's mission to make up that year, because I was born in early January also, so I really needed to make up that year because I was the oldest one. So then we finished, then we went to Emerson Junior High School in Yonkers, and then I went to Gorton Senior High School in Yonkers, and found out in May of 11th grade that a friend of mine was going to college after 11th grade. So I said, here's my chance. If she can do it, I can do it. My grades were better than hers. So I applied to the same college she applied to. I had to take summer school English, 12th grade English, passed that, and went to college after 11th grade. So
and what college were you?
I went to Pace University. Well, it was Pace College at the time in Pleasantville for 1 year because I was not prepared. This was May. I wasn't ready to go away yet. And then after my first year at Pace, I applied to 2 colleges. I applied to Stony Brook and New Paltz, and I went to visit both of them and had more fun when I went to Stony Brook, so I went to Stony Brook when I got in there. So I graduated from Stony Brook with a bachelor's in psychology. Oh, I know what happened. When I went to Pace, my freshman year at Pace, I was a Spanish major. That's what I wanted to do. And I was supposed to take a communications class. And they didn't have openings in communications, so they said I could take it the following year, and they put me in Psych 101. And that's where I fell in love with psychology. I loved this class. It was great. There were about 30 kids, Psych 101. It was because it was a small private college. And loved that class. And that's where I changed my mind that I was going to be a social worker. So I transferred to Stony Brook, where I had 800 people in Bio 101. It was a very different kind of campus. But got through that, got my bachelor's in psychology. Started applying for a master's program. Did not get in the first year that I applied for my master's in social work, so I started working. Didn't get in the second because I only applied to Stony Brook because I wasn't going anywhere. I was sticking around, and didn't get in again. And then said I'm not applying again because I got frustrated with it. So I waited about 6 years later. I said, okay, I'm going to try again, and I got in that time. Stony Brook tends to like to take older students. They don't like you straight out of college. So, and I had been working. I had worked at I worked at Stony Brook as a dorm director. And I worked at Stony Brook in a psychology lab as a lab assistant. We were doing longitudinal studies of children, of parents with schizophrenia looking for childhood indicators of adult schizophrenia. So that was a 20-year study that I worked for I don't know, a year or two, which somehow got me into the state retirement system by working for that program. Didn't know what that meant when I was, 23. Then I got a job at, where did I go next? At Stony Brook again, working for the psychiatry department, doing audiovisual work for them. So I did videotaping and photography, which I didn't know anything how to do, but they taught me because the director of that program, his girlfriend was my best friend, so he hired me and taught me darkroom photography, videotaping, how to make slides, how to do all this stuff. So I worked there, which also kept me in the state retirement system. And then, but I was on a grant. So the grant ran out and I didn't have a job. So about 3 months I was unemployed and found out, was reading through the want ads and I said, I'll never find a job. And there was a want ad one day for audiovisual director at Children's Psychiatric Hospital. I was like, that's my job. That's it. That's what I do. I work with kids. I'm a psych major. I do AV work. That's my job. So I called them up and I got this woman on the phone, Dot, I'll never forget. And I said, I'm the best person for this job. I said, you're not going to have to interview anybody else because this is my job. And they interviewed me. And one other guy interviewed for it and they hired me. And I said, I knew this was my job. Like as soon as I saw it, I was like, sigh of relief. This is it. So for 5 years, I worked at Sagamore Children's Hospital in Melville as their audiovisual coordinator, doing all their photography and videotaping, and also got into graduate school at that time. And the director was very nice. The director of the hospital was very nice, and he let me sit in on social work and psychology training programs that they did because he knew I was in graduate school and he was a social worker. So he really was great letting me sit in on all these programs. And so then I graduated from Stony Brook with my master's. But as I was graduating, there were two women that I met who worked at the early intervention program in Brentwood. And they said that there's an opening for a social worker. And I said, what's a school social worker? Like, I never even heard of a school social worker. Didn't know there were them, and were people who did that. And they said, yeah, there's an opening, just apply. And I said, I never thought about it. They said, so it'll be a practice interview. So I called up Brentwood. I got an interview. I was interviewed by Florence Cohen, who passed away, Drew Robinson, and a woman named Gail Melnikoff-Schlein. And they interviewed me for the position. And I was hired without a resume and without my degree. I was hired to work in Brentwood in 1985. So September 1985 is when I came into the early intervention program in Brentwood. So that's how, and all the time in the state retirement system, in the teachers' retirement system. So when I came into Brentwood and they said, did you ever work for the state before? I said, well, yeah, I did. And they checked out everything and it got me back into the teachers' retirement system. And I came in with like 7 years experience.
If you hadn't
already
pursued that path,
mm-hmm.
what might have been your second choice of career?
I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. I wanted to be a Spanish interpreter.
Okay.
Something like that.
So the year you arrived in Brentwood was 1985.
85.
Okay. I'm going to jump ahead to ask you this question. Of all of the years that you've had and all of the things that you've done,
Mm-hmm.
was there a worst professional day?
Worst professional day? You mean worst in terms of something I did wrong?
No,
Or,
no.
Oh, just like a really horrible day in the
Right.
district kind of thing?
No, kind of something that might have happened or something that you might have experienced.
Yeah, there were a couple of bad days. There was one day pretty early on where a young lady had been a student had been returning home from school and was involved in this terrible accident where a car hit a pole and the electric line came down and hit her, and she was electrocuted on the lawn, on the grass in front of kids who were watching. It just was like an awful, awful day. And, and then we had to, as the psychology social work department, as the support department, had to go into a lot of schools and talk to a lot of kids about things that had happened and what they saw and what, kids who were friends with her, so, and then we had to, of course, go to the funeral and be support for the community. And, that was a pretty terrible day. There were other days where kids died. I mean, there's nothing worse than a kid dying. So, any day where that happened was the worst day.
Do you mentioned the application or your interview for the position in Brentwood.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember any of the questions that you were asked at that time?
I remember Florence was a wonderful woman. She was great. And I remember going into the interview, and I have long nails now, but I had very long nails then. They were even longer, and I believe they were purple that day. And and that's relevant because the question was, what if a young parent brought her child into the early intervention program and didn't know what services were available into the community? What would you recommend to her? And the second part of the question was, and where do you get your nails done? And I said to Florence, which one do you want me to answer first? And she said, the nails. So I do remember that question.
What were your first impressions of the district once you started working full time here?
Well, I had some preconceived notions about the district because when I told people from Sagamore that I was going to work in Brentwood, they were like, oh, you're not going to work in Brentwood. That's a terrible community. It's a terrible place. It's scary. It's horrible. It's, there's terrible population there. And then some of the people, I won't mention, some of the people on staff, you don't want to work for them. It's a terrible person. You're going to hate it. You're going to hate it. So that's how I went in to Brentwood. And I'm happy to announce that every single one of those things was wrong, that I adored working in Brentwood, that I loved the people I worked with. There were here and there people who maybe, in my opinion, didn't agree with them, and there were some who were more intimidating than others. But by and large, the staff that I worked with, I can't imagine better staff anywhere. The community, the people, I loved the people I worked with. I was never afraid to go into any neighborhood or community or home. I went into lots of homes as a social worker. I did lots of home visits, and I never, ever, I was welcomed into people's homes all the time, regardless of, who I was visiting or what reason I was visiting them. Would you like a cup of coffee? Can I get you something to eat? The most welcoming, warm community that I could ever imagine. So,
and the buildings that you were assigned to?
Early intervention, my first year, and initially I was split between East Middle and Southeast Elementary. I was there for about a month, and I was switched positions. They switched me with somebody else who worked in the district. They put him at those buildings, and they put me at early intervention, which I loved. And I worked there for a year. And at the end of the year, I was called and told that I was being moved to North Middle School. And I was like, I didn't ask for this. I don't want to move. I really like where I work. And Mr. Brodsky, who was the one calling me, said, you're going to like working at North Middle School. And I said, but I really like working here. And it's like, you don't argue with Mr. Brodsky. He says, but you're going to North Middle School, and that's the end of it. So I went to North Middle School for the next 24 years with splits into other buildings, and loved working in North Middle School.
Okay.
So
is that where you finished?
I finished in North Middle and North Elementary split, but mostly North Middle.
Okay.
Yeah. Do
you remember some of the people that you met the first year that you stayed connected with, that you stayed friendly with?
First year in the district?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Drew Robinson was a psychologist at early intervention. I just saw him recently at a R.O.B.S meeting. We bowled together on a league for a while. We're in touch now and then.
So you maintained those connections.
Chris Mosier, she has a different name now. She was a social worker at early intervention. Can't remember. Chris, something with a V. I can't remember her last name, but we kind of stayed. I saw her recently at R.O.B.S. Andrea Malafis is a social worker at early intervention. We still keep in touch with each other. I think that's it from that year.
Ronda, I'm sure that you worked just as hard your last year as you did in those early years. And what I wanted to ask you was, how did you see Brentwood as being the same throughout that span of time? And how has it changed? How is it different?
Well, let's see. How it stayed the same was, I think the people that I worked with were always great. Some years, of course, better than others. Not everybody's the same. We had the best principal I ever worked with, I'm going to say, was Mark Neisowitz. There was never a building that was more fun than working in that building. We had Mark Neisowitz as principal and Jose Suarez as assistant principal, and we had so much fun. They used to just play practical jokes. They used to make funny announcements in the morning. It just was the camaraderie and in Hebrew we would say ruach, the spirit was wonderful and just like so much fun. And so it was really like great. Like you just loved getting up in the morning and going to work every day. So that was the best. There was never a better principal than Mark. There were other really good principals. He was, far and above the best.
Ronda, I know you had a job description.
Uh-huh.
But forgetting that for a moment, what was your own purpose? When you say it was fun getting up and coming into work, what was your reason for getting up and going to work every morning for all that time?
The stereotypical thing that a social worker says is, I love working with people. I love making a difference in people's lives. And people say to me, it must be so hard to be a social worker in Brentwood. They have such problems. I'm like, but that's what was so great about being a social worker in Brentwood. I was never bored. I always had someone to see. I always had somewhere to go. I always had something to do. And I really feel like I helped people. I got thank yous. I got phone calls. I got letters. I have a whole book. I made a book of every thank you letter, every card, everything I ever got, every commendation from my bosses, from Edie Welsh, from Howard Brodsky, from Doug Walters, from everybody who I worked for, from every principal. Every time I got a letter, I put it. Eventually, I found them all. Like I dug them out, and I made a book, and I have them all, and it's like you can't even close it. And it's nice, like to look back over it once in a while. Like, oh, I remember that. I got a letter of one day Gloria Hanneman, who was the guidance counselor in my building, who I also adore. She and I, there was a policeman who came into the building from the Bronx, and he was looking to talk to a young lady in the school who had some issues with her dad, and he had abused her or something, and they were trying to find him, and she wasn't with him, and so they interviewed the girl, and Gloria was called in because she speaks Spanish, and the girl only spoke Spanish, and the police officer, the detective, didn't speak Spanish, and I was there because I was a social worker. So we sat with this girl, and the girl is explaining in Spanish where her dad lives in the Bronx without knowing any of the street names. She's describing the neighborhood. And as she's describing the neighborhood, I'm getting flashbacks of my childhood because that's the same street like that my school was on. And she says, and there were stairs, and I said, and did the stairs go down from what was the street? Popham Avenue to Undercliff? She goes, oh yeah, it was Undercliff Avenue. And I was like, that's where I grew up. And so I was able to tell the cop what street, and they were able to go find the guy, and they caught him, and they arrested him, and we got this great letter thanking us for our cooperation and our help on cracking this case, and it was like, that's amazing. So there were like some really amazing days like that where things happened, and I just wanted to remember them all. And as you get older, you might forget things here and there, but I have them all on the file.
Did you maintain a connection with any of your own teachers after you left school? Were there any kind of a personal or professional connection with people that you had as teachers?
My teachers from growing up, not really that I remember.
Okay. Were you ever involved during your professional life with any of our organizations, with the BTA, with any of the professional organizations in school? Did you have any time for that?
I did some courses at the Teacher Center.
Okay.
I did the
But you weren't a building delegate or running for office? Okay.
No, I did a lot of that outside of school. In my synagogue. I'm very involved. I'm on the board. I'm on the sisterhood. I'm a member of Comac Jewish Center. We joined there when my oldest son was getting ready to learn Hebrew for his bar mitzvah. I got to meet a lot of great people there that I'm friends with. That's my main social group right now, is the people from that group. I got involved in their sisterhood, which is the Women of Comac Jewish Center, and we do fundraisers. I run mahjong tournaments, and I run the annual membership dinner, and just go to most of the activities that they have there. And
Journal.
And I was the editor for their newsletter for 8 years, right? And bragging a little, won a couple of awards with that, so that was a really nice thing to do. And because of that, got involved with the R.O.B.S newsletter also because of my experience with that.
Sure.
And I'm also now on the board of trustees at my synagogue, and
Great.
I think I'm going to be on the executive board this year. They kind of asked me to serve in some position there, and I don't say no really easily.
Sometimes it's hard to say no. I understand. I'm going to take us back to the Brentwood experience.
Okay.
Were you ever afraid to go to work?
Never. There were a couple of times, maybe after I called Child Protective Services, and a parent would get arrested or go to jail or something, and they would know that it was me, even though it's supposed to be anonymous. The kids would go home and say, "Well, Miss Brooks called and said blah blah blah." So I mean, they knew who I was. So a couple of times I was a little nervous, maybe to walk out to my car at the end of the day. But often the parents would talk to me after the whole ordeal was over, and we would discuss, and they would understand why I did what I did. So.
Ronda, you're a very, very outgoing and very easygoing person, but there have to be things that you encountered that used to make you angry on some level, and I wondered if you can talk to that point. What got under your skin?
The worst thing that happened was while I was helping a parent secure housing because she and her children were homeless. She was sitting in my office. She was using my cell phone to call her daughter in New Jersey because it was too complicated to go through the switchboard at school. So I just let her use my phone, and she was making calls. And while she was talking to me, facing me, her kids were standing behind me in the office, and they were playing. I had toys and games out, and they were playing with whatever they were playing with. And after they left, I realized that my wallet was not in my pocketbook. So I didn't even think that it could have been them. And I called the restaurant where I had lunch, and I looked all over the building, and I looked in my car, and my wallet was nowhere to be found. And somebody said to me, "Well, who's in your office today?" And I mentioned this family, and they said, "Oh, those children are known thieves." And I was like, their mother was sitting there facing them because I couldn't have been. So, and now they were homeless, and I know that they had just found some housing, but I didn't know where. So I called the Department of Social Services, and I explained my story, and I said, "I think these kids took my wallet." And they said, "We're really not allowed to tell you where they're living." And then she told me where they were living. So I asked the principal, it wasn't North Middle principal, it was in another building, we called the police, and the police would not go there to check it out. And the principal wouldn't go with me, and I called my husband, and he wouldn't go with me, and my friends wouldn't go with me. So I got in my car, and I drove to the house, because I'm out of my mind, and there in the driveway of this house that they just moved into like a minute ago are the mother and the son. And I walked up to the mother, and I said, "You have a lot of nerve allowing your kids to steal my stuff while I'm helping you." I said, "Where's my wallet?" And she turns to her son, and she says, "Get her wallet." And he goes into their car, opens the car, pulls out my wallet, and hands it to me. And I open up the wallet, and there's no money in it. And I never know how much money I have. I have whatever, I throw it in my bag, in my pocket. But I happened to know that there was $50 in the wallet that day. And I said, "Where's my money?" And she turns to him again, and he says, get her money. And he goes into the car, and he pulls out $50, and he hands it to me. And I said, again, something like, "You have a lot of nerve." And I got in my car, and I drove away. Like this. I was shaking. I was like, what is the matter with me? For a wallet? For what? I have children. I am a mom. I have young children. Why am I out of my mind? But it just got me so incensed that she would allow her children to steal, watching them steal from me while I was helping her. So the next day, both kids got called down to school. They got suspended from school. They left. I never saw them again because they left town. They moved out of town. They were gone. But that was probably the thing I was angriest about, was that somebody would steal from me while I was helping them. I know things get stolen and things, but I was in the middle of helping them. So that was probably the angriest I got and the craziest I got.
What was your official date of retirement?
July 1st, 2010.
Okay. Was it an easy decision to make or a difficult decision?
It became easier because of some politics that were going on in the building that were making it really uncomfortable to work there. So that made it easier. The incentive they were offering made it easier.
What was the building, by the way?
North Middle.
Okay, that's right. You said that.
Yeah. And North Elementary. Politics in both buildings, I'll say.
Okay.
Yeah, it was time.
Was there, if I ask you to identify or point to a single professional accomplishment that made you proud, can you point to something and tell us about it?
Yeah, and let's see, September of 2009, I had an intern. I was supervising interns for about, I don't know, 20 years. I had a different intern from Stony Brook, from Adelphi. Every year I worked with one or two interns, social work interns, and I was really proud of the work that I did with them. So one of the women who I worked with, Janine Verdrager, I had assigned her to help somebody find glasses. The kid needed glasses. So I said, okay, go. She was very internet savvy, and she started looking up stuff about glasses. And she found a thing called the Vision Van. It was a company called Luxottica had a Vision Van that would go to different school districts around the world, really, but around the country, and they would provide free eyeglass exams and glasses for kids. So I got on the phone with them, and I started making phone calls, and we started making arrangements, and blah, 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 blah. And in September of 2009, the Vision Van pulled into North Middle School and provided free eyeglasses for 110 children who worked in who attended North Middle School, and also went to, I think South Middle School was the other one, and 65 or 70 pairs of glasses over there as well, for free eye exams, free glasses, and it's all volunteers that work on this. And my husband, who happens, although he owns a printing business, happens to be a licensed optician, took a day off from work and also volunteered to work on the van, and so 110 kids. My husband said, if it's, you ever buy glasses, what is it, $300, $400 for a pair of glasses plus an exam? So times that by 100, so that $40,000 worth of services and goods were obtained for nothing. So that was a really great day.
What was the total number of years you devoted to
Brentwood?
Brentwood?
25.
25. What was the most fun of the job? The best part of it, as far as you are concerned?
Best part was the years that Mark Neisowitz was principal at North Middle School. We had so much fun. They did a practical joke one day. They were always doing practical jokes. So one day, Mark calls me to the office, and he says there's a kid in one of the classes who was talking about hurting himself. You have to see him. And I said, okay, what's his name? And he gave me a funny name. It wasn't Juan Epstein, like on Welcome Back, Kotter, but it was something like that. It was like a Spanish name and a Jewish name combined. And I was like, there's no kid in the building with that name. He goes, yes, there is, and you have to see him. Straight face. And I said, okay, but there's nobody with that name in the building. And he says, I'm telling you, there's a kid, and he's talking about hurting himself, and you have to see him. Great. I get on the PA, and I announce, will Juan Epstein please come to the guidance office? Kid shows up. We sit down. We start talking. Is everything okay? You all right? What's bothering you, honey? I heard that you wanted to hurt yourself. Everything okay at home? Yeah, everything's fine. Everything's fine. You sure? There's nothing? And we're going on for like a half an hour. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I said, okay, honey, I'm going to let you go. I just heard, I was worried about you. I just want to make sure everything's okay. He leaves. Mark and Jose Suarez are standing outside my office, hysterically laughing. I'm like, okay, what was that about? And he said, we made up the name. It wasn't a kid in the building. We just wanted to play a joke on you and have you page his kid. Kid thought I said Juan, I don't know, Esposito. He thought he heard his name. He comes to the office. I sit down and do this interview with this kid who's perfectly fine. So it kind of backfired. But that was really funny. But that's like kinds of things that happen. They just like We just had fun. We had fun.
Yes.
We had Ross Herzog was the AP in the building for a while, and Mark and Ross did their version of Who's on First on the morning announcements one day, just as a literacy thing. They just read the whole script of Who's on First. We were hysterical. The whole building was laughing. Like, it just was fun. It just was upbeat. And one day I had a kid who asked me, how old do you have to be to get married in Suffolk County? And I was a little young and naive at the time, and I looked it up. I found out the information. I said, you have to be 14 or something like that. With parents' permission, in New York, you can get married. I didn't know that. I was surprised. So, you get married at 14. Kid goes home and, long story short, did something that he shouldn't have done and ended up in a compromising position with another kid, and the parents caught them and insisted that they get married. And because the social worker told the kid what age you could get married, they came to school and were looking for me. They were like gunning for me because I told them. It wasn't exactly how it was presented to me, but so Mark and Ross intercepted these parents and talked to them, and they never got to me. And they defended me. They didn't even know the story. Defended me 1,000%. And I didn't even know this was going on. And then after they got rid of the parents, they came in to see me, and they said, "The hell did you do? Like, what did you tell this kid?" And I was like, "What happened?" So, the whole story finally came together. But you never felt like they always had your back. They always defended their staff, and that was just the best feeling.
Was there anything that happened that if you could replay it, you would have done it differently?
Probably.
Okay.
I don't know if I can think of something
nothing
specific.
Pops into your mind. Okay.
I'm pretty okay with things that happen.
Some of the more national events that happened while you were teaching or working in Brentwood?
Well, for sure, September 11th happened, and my experience with September 11th is very different from everybody else's. 2 weeks before September 11th, during that summer vacation, I suffered a heart attack on August 28th, 2001, and I'm fine. Full recovery, everything's fine, no damage, I'm all good. And on September 10th, I went to the doctor for my, all clear checkup to go back to work. So she's talking to me, how do you feel? Anything hurting? Anything bothering you? I'm fine. And she says, all right, everything's good. Go back to work. I said, okay, when should I go back to work? This was now Monday, September 10th. Not knowing, of course. And she said, you go back tomorrow. And I said, kidding around. I said, come on, doc, I had a heart attack. Give me a break. She says, okay, go back Thursday. So that's how I came to be sitting home alone on September 11th, watching everything unfold all by myself. My husband called. He said, plane at the World Trade Center, turn on the TV. So, and I sat, glued to the TV the rest of the day like everybody else. So to the point where I was like, my heart was pounding, everybody's was, and I called my cardiologist and I said, I know everybody feels the way I do, but I just had a heart attack. Oh my God, what should I do? And they said, turn off the TV. And it didn't occur to me that I should do that. I said, oh, good idea. Turned off the TV. Anyway, so now, 11 years later, I still feel guilty that I wasn't at work that day, because as a social worker, I would have been there to help other people who might have been, scared, upset, known people, whatever would have happened. And I still feel bad to this day, like I should have been there. And if I wasn't kidding around with the doctor, I would have been there that day.
Is there something you can point to that you can say you miss the most about not being active anymore?
Well, I'm certainly active.
I'm
just not active in Brentwood.
I mean, an active employee of
right,
the district.
Yeah, because I do have my own private practice now, so I am very busy.
Okay.
But what do I miss? I don't know. I think I kind of feel like it came to a good end, and I moved on.
But you don't miss the
politics.
politics.
The people. I don't miss the politics. No, definitely don't miss the politics. I miss a lot of people that I worked with who now, as moving up in years, a lot of them have retired also. So the
now,
people I was mostly friends with.
You just mentioned something that I want to focus on a little bit. You said you have your private practice. Talk about what you're doing.
So while I was working at Brentwood, I was working part-time doing counseling, running social skills groups for kids with Asperger's syndrome and ADHD and other social problems, getting along with other people, speech problems, and for kids from kind of kindergarten through high school age. And I was working with a doctor whose practice it was. And when I retired from Brentwood, my plan was to continue working a couple of days a week, doing these groups in the evening, and just have my days to myself and hang out and play mahjong and do things with my friends. And it turned out that he took very ill right when I retired, and he had to retire. So that left me and the psychologist I was working with a choice of what we were going to do. We were going to close down the practice, or we were going to take over the practice. And we did a lot of research, and we found out that we were in a position where we could take over the practice. So this became my business. Not planning ever to own my own business. I now am the owner of a business called Behavioral Health Services in Comac, where I still am running social skills groups for kids with problems getting along with other kids, making friends, keeping friends. So I do that a couple nights a week, and that's what keeps me busy during my days.
Yeah, very interesting.
And during my summers, I do a program called People to People, where I take kids, school-age kids from between 5th grade and high school, on trips around the world. And
how many kids?
It's usually about 40 kids in a group with me and 3 or 4 other leaders. And we and the first year I took a group of high school kids. We went on a trip to China and Hong Kong for 19 days. My second trip for 19 days was with high school kids to Italy, France, Switzerland, and Austria. Last summer, I went with 5th and 6th graders to England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. And next summer, I'm going again with 5th and 6th graders to England and France. So it's a wonderful program. I get to travel for free, which is awesome. It's a lot of preparation and orientation meetings and working with the kids to get it ready. But I've gotten to see places that I never would have seen in my life. So I'm really enjoying my retirement. It's a wonderful thing. Is
there anything you would like to have been able to accomplish before you retired that you were not able to for whatever reason?
I was working with a committee on setting up a policy for handling emergencies in the district. And it never really finished getting together. We had lots of meetings about how to handle emergencies within the district, handling emergencies that occur in the community, like a death of somebody maybe in a car accident, a kid from school, or something even bigger like 9/11, and how to have a policy about who calls who and who tells who and what happens next and who's on what committee, and so we could be prepared to handle these things right away. And it never really finished coming together. So I would have liked to complete that, but I did as much as I could do.
What advice, Ron, would you give to somebody who you discovered was about to go into do the work that you did in the district, and as they were coming in, to give them some helpful advice? What might you offer?
This is once they already get a job in the district, right? Because it's very difficult to get a job as a school social worker.
Once they have the job.
Once they have the job, just, I guess, be open, listen to people, listen to them where they're at. Don't tell people things if they don't want to hear it. Sometimes people just want to listen, just want you to listen. I had a kid in my office once, and for 45 minutes, I very specifically just listened to what she said. I remember doing this, that she was talking about whatever she was talking about. It wasn't, she just was talking about her family and friends. And I was listening, and I was saying, tell me more about that. And at the end of the 45 minutes, she said, "Thank you so much." And I said, "What did I do? I just, I didn't do anything." And she said, "You listened to me." She said, "Nobody listens to me." Like, what parent listens to their child talk for 45 minutes in a row without saying, "Well, I think you should do this. Well, I think, I got to make dinner. I got to answer the phone, and I got a meeting to go to, and and I'll talk to you later. And thanks for telling me." And, but who really listens to anybody for 45 minutes nonstop? And, tell me more. Like, I was really interested in what she had to say. So I think that's really great advice, is be willing to listen, and sometimes listen for the messages that are under what they're telling you. But listen, and don't think you know everything. You don't know everything. Let them tell you. I learned more from the kids, I think, than they learned from me. It was just, the experiences. I have lists and lists of experiences that I could just go on and on. But
I want to know, of all the things you talked about, and you've shocked me with a couple of the things that we just pulled out at the last minute here, what is it that we haven't talked about that you want to get recorded on this?
I think it's important to know that kids are the product of their upbringing, that that what you say or do in front of your kids, they hear you and they see you, even if you don't think that they do. That you should set a good example for your children, that you should be willing to do whatever it is you tell your kids to do, and just make your kids feel like they're the most important things that that ever existed, because they are.
Yes. Rhonda, I just want to say thank you so much for the time that you've given us to record this story, and I'm glad you're part of it now.
Thank you so much.